Okay, cool, everybody. So, yeah, thanks for joining me today. Thank you to Valentino for organizing this and Maker Faire. Otherwise, we would have been able to be there physically, but it's nice to be able to do all this virtual stuff and take these pieces and exhibit these artists to an Italian community here. So this is an interesting time we find ourselves in, and nice that this opportunity exists for us. So thank you so much for organizing the festival. I just wanted to start by introducing the artists today. So these are both artists who are or were tech residents of the Pioneer Works Technology Residency. And so Pioneer Works is a nonprofit arts and cultural space in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And so we do exhibitions, artist residencies, performances, musical events, and we do a lot of activations with the community and education. And so we're a physical site, but for the past 8 or 9 months or so, we've been operating remotely and virtually, having an event here or there. But over the past few months, specifically, we've been working with Umber to develop a web-based game piece, which we'll talk about today. And maybe last year, I think 2019, Ryan Kuo was in residence and we worked on Faith, which we will probably have an opportunity to talk a little bit about today. So Umer Majeed is a multidisciplinary visual artist. She received her MFA from Parsons, the New School for Design, in 2016 and graduated from Beacon House National University in Lahore, Pakistan in 2013. Her writing, performance, and animation work engage with familial archives to explore Pakistani state, urban, and digital infrastructure through a feminist lens. Majeed has shown in venues across Pakistan, North America, and Europe. Recent group exhibitions include The Divided Self at the Slot Foundation, Philadelphia, the Museum Within and Without, the State Armitage Museum, St. Petersburg, Russia, Promises to Keep at Apex Art, New York, Witness at the Karachi Biennial in Karachi, Pakistan, and Volumes Queens International 2018 in the Queens Museum. She's a recipient of numerous fellowships, including the HWP Fellowship, Ashkal Alwan in Beirut, Lebanon, Refiguring Feminist Futures Web Residency, Academy Schloss Solitude in ZKM, Germany, and the Digital Earth Fellowship, Hibos, the Netherlands. Her work has been acquired by several private collections, including the Lekha and Anupam Podar collection at the Devi Art Foundation in Gurgaon, India. Majeed is a member of the HHH Collective, currently based in New York, USA. And she lives and works in New York, USA, and Lahore, Pakistan. In 2018, Majeed had her debut exhibition in the name of Hypersurface Space of the Present Rubber Factory, New York. And she is a tech resident at Pioneer Works. And Ryan Kuo lives and works in New York City. His works are process-based and diagrammatic and often invoke a person or people arguing. This is not to state an argument about a thing, but to be caught in a state of argument. He utilizes video games, productivity software, web design, motion graphics, and sampling to produce circuitous and unresolved movements that track the passage of objects through white escape routes. His recent projects aim to crystallize his position as a hateful little thing whose body fills up white space out of both resentment and necessity. These include an AI conversational agent that embodies the blind faith that underpins both white supremacy and miserable white liberalism and casts doubt on non-believers. And an artist book about aspirational workflows, File, a user manual modeled after software guides for power users. His 2018 solo commission at Bitforms Gallery, The Pointer, addressed whiteness as an unremitting, effective failure that erases bodies, including its own, in its search for a neutral point of origin and doubled as an admission of his own familiarity with the elaborate contortions needed to assimilate into whiteness. His work has appeared at Queen's Museum, Bitforms Gallery Transfer, Sturm den Haag, Goethe Institute China, Left Gallery, Copperfield Gallery, Goldsmiths Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts, and MIT Media Lab, and has been published in Art from Art America, Bomb, and Rhizome. He was recently resident at Pioneer Works in the Queen's Museum Studio Program. He holds a Master's of Science in Art, Culture, and Technology from MIT. Thank you all. We're done. Sorry, there's no more time left. But yeah, I like to read your bios because it gives us kind of like a sense of the overlaps in some of the things you all are thinking about, and certainly kind of introduces you all to each other. And seems like you all have been working at similar spaces and find yourselves at institutions that support this kind of work. And I think it's nice to see that there are other folks that are, it's just a nice reminder that there are other people that are supporting this kind of work. So I think maybe to begin, I'd like to start with maybe a look at Dumb Desire, the piece that Ryan submitted for this Maker Faire. And then we'll move on to kind of discussing that a little bit, showing photocopynet, the piece that we made with Umber. And then maybe just use that as a launching off point for some further discussion. Ryan, would you mind sharing with us that piece?
Sure, let me do that. I think this should work. You're seeing this, right?
Yes.
Just let it play out for a couple minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Stopping it. I was waiting for the text to get to the top of the screen.
I'm seeing definitely some parallels between that and Faith, with the well, first of all, just kind of like the use of text, and then I'm sure the back and forth you probably went through with getting the text just right, um, which was fun to do with you for Faith. Yeah, I want to show photocopy.net. At first glance, these pieces look really different, but I think, just from kind of um, seeing them both and kind of running through them both in my head, kind of found a lot of things that kind of tie them together. So I think it'll be fun to kind of discuss with you guys. I might just read a little bit about Dumb Desire, your very short description about it, just to kind of give audience members and Umber and myself a reminder of where you're coming from with that. So Dumb Desire. This is a software work that depicts a minimal game space that adjusts itself endlessly as the work is run. It prints a string of text that attempts to lend meaning to its movements. And so, and that's your description. And so, what I think is interesting about this game environment is the simple fact that you're unable to control anything. It kind of ignores any of the user input and runs itself, essentially. Could you talk a little bit about your decision to kind of making that kind of piece with that limited user interaction?
Sure. I think this is the fourth project I've done that involves having a Gamespace generate a kind of a stream of 3D, like a 3D space in real time, and kind of cuts out the player entirely. I think these game engines, like in this case Unity, which I think we both used for our projects, when a lot of artists use Unity, but it's really designed with the assumption that you're going to at some point like insert a player character, and the player character will be able to act on the world in a certain way, and all of the tools that the engine presents are kind of they're kind of like framed in these kind of cinematic terms, like having cameras, having certain positions, having certain kinds of lighting, having a scene with certain kinds of like props. I used to be a game journalist years ago, and so for me, it's a bit of it's a lightly political and maybe at worst a reactionary stance against this idea of player agency or meaningful play, where you're always being told that, or at least I was always hearing that game spaces allow us to inhabit the shoes of another consciousness or another kind of experience, just by kind of simulating that or resembling it. And for me, actually I feel two ways about it. One way, of course, is that of course you can't really do that because like my life is my life, and it's kind of like this is the entire history of art and literature and so on is about trying to like wonder whether we can make any connection, and so you can't just do that with an engine. But on the other hand, the engine has a certain kind of pull. It's like a very instant kind of effect and illusion that it creates. And so I think for me, making these works is about maybe cutting straight to that power, that simulation power, and seeing what happens when the computer kind of takes over and kind of directs a scene on its own. This is the most simple and kind of elemental of the works that I've done in this vein. It's really just a few elements, and it's really just it's kind of the first in a series I'm projecting about experimental kind of simulations or kind of speculative works that occur in a white cube space that might resemble an art gallery. And it's called Dumb Desire because I guess it seemed to me, I was in the shower thinking about what a dumb desire it is to want to be in a white cube. And so that's basically the piece. And but just to say that there isn't really a lot of overtly political content in this work in particular, but it does get to an interest I have, an ongoing interest in this experience of being contained by a thing while also being constituted by that thing. And so, obviously this is like, there's an implication that there is like a body in this virtual space, but there is of course no body. It's just it could be an eye or something, but what you're seeing is just a space kind of rotating and kind of making its own kind of volume and giving you a sense that, you know, the white cube is the piece, which is an empty space. So yeah.
Awesome. I want to kind of put a pin in that and some of the things that you're talking about, because I think I want to bring in Umber's work a little bit there, and it will help us kind of like find some common ground in some of those things you're talking about. So I'm gonna load up this piece here. And of course, okay, here we go. This will work. Yes, it will work. Awesome. Oops. Strange. Uh, um, okay, so I think that might be an okay place to kind of um, stop that piece, right, Umber?
Yeah.
I think maybe just before I let you, let me tell us a little bit more about that piece, because people, you know, are seeing that for the first time. Just want to note that that first kind of scene, I'm able to kind of control this first player character that Ryan introduced us to, this concept that Ryan introduced us to during his description of his piece, and I'm able to walk around and control the movement of that character. And then the second kind of portion of the work, those camera controls are controlled by us and are animated, and so the input is from the user is taken away, and that's not being controlled by me. So yeah, I mean, I just thought that that was just also like an element of both the works that kind of brought them together, but that's a little bit more superficial, but I'll let you, if you can, Umber, would you let us tell us a little bit about that piece? Um, and if you know what, maybe would you mind if actually I just maybe read your description?
Sure.
Um, so, photocopy.net is offered as a virtual tourism experience exploring the ideas and implications of simulacra, the copy as a virtual environment, and web VR artwork. It explores a concept called pirate modernity by Indian media theorist Ravi Sundaram, the dissemination of the media culture through the copy as a representation of subaltern population in the city, combining familial archives, the apparatus of the screen, tools of leisure, context of gentrification in South Asia. The project seeks for viewers to loiter in the kitsch imagery of corporate culture and critical analysis a failed tourism company of the artist's uncle, a digitally revitalized Trans-Pakistan adventure services. And I think maybe that gives us enough of a context to kind of see what you're playing with there. But yeah, could you tell us a little bit about some of the ideas in the piece?
Yeah, sure. So photocopy.net is basically an extension of a larger research project around looking at a corrupt housing community in Lahore, Pakistan. It is a housing community that has, replicas of modernist icons such as like an Eiffel Tower, Sphinx. It also has a Trafalgar Square and reanimate or redesigned, um, under the context of the Islamic Republic. So there's definitely changes here and there in terms of naming these structures and how they function. And so I've been interested in using my uncle's failed tourism company as a lens, using leisure as a lens to kind of infiltrate the politics within the housing community, which is known to have um, you know, through the process of land grabbing and a land mafia, acquired these lands, gentrified people out, and created this kind of dystopic imaginary. Using global capital networks of South Asian diaspora. So essentially, the gentrifiers are South Asian or like are Pakistanis who have lived abroad. And so I've been interested in using the lens or digital spaces as a space to both contemplate, loiter, and reflect upon these conditions that can't necessarily be intervened in the space itself in Lahore and in Pakistan. And so um, essentially, I'm interested in using these digital tools to both reflect what's potent in the urban scape in Beria town, um, and to kind of outline it through these digital tools. So let's say in the first space that you saw, there were these tracings of these animals, and they're actually animal sculptures that were commissioned by local artisans. And so the idea of the handmade, these kinds of like failed fiberglass animal sculptures kind of reflect a lot of the circumstances or the subjectivities that have been ousted out from the housing community and have been replicated in this kind of form. And so I was interested in kind of outlining that as like the main subject of the tour. And then the second space is more of embodying kind of the world of um, the ideas around Trans Pakistan, which is what the housing community is, which is what the tourism company is called. And it's using this kind of counterclockwise movement, which is something that I've been thinking about in relation to a main architectural feature in the housing community, a roundabout, and thinking about the pedestrian's role in the counter use of the roundabout and kind of disrupting the urban design logic of Beria Town by replicating it in a kind of planetary, kind of macro lens. So those were some of the ideas.
That's awesome to hear. Just from working on the pieces from like as an engineer, you know, you have these kind of tasks for us that are like, okay, make it work counterclockwise. And when you're kind of just have your head, like in the code, and you want to make this thing happen, you don't think to ask, okay, why counterclockwise? And so it's nice to hear you kind of explain like the meaning behind that, the counter use of the architecture or the civic design of this place, works clockwise with this roundabout, and kind of wanting to counter that is a nice, very poetic movement there with the camera. You also talked about early on in making this piece about wanting this to be kind of accessible by people in that community, and there was like a certain amount of like importance for you placed on like this technology being accessible. So like, you didn't want to make something that was like a heavy kind of like video game that people had to install on computers. You wanted to be accessible with like mobile devices. um I guess maybe, can you speak a little bit about
Sure.
that?
So one of the main experiences of being in the housing community is that there's a lot of surveillance. There's a lot of surveillance of who can come in and out. And so tourism was a very interesting umbrella to think through that of like, what is the way we can have accessibility to this housing community that has so-called like tourist spots with these replicas. And so one of the main the only technology that's like isn't so heavily surveilled is the mobile phone. It like is a cell phone, smartphone. Um, and so I thought a lot of the project is surrounding ways in which technologies can be accessible through the phone and then can be experienced both within the space and then imagery from outside the space. And so the smartphone is kind of the trigger or the bridge to allow this imagery or content to go through. Um, so that's the kind of logic. But it's also interesting working on this project now and also considering like the circumstances with COVID. It's just like one, having accessibility to physical spaces now is like very much limited, and what gathering means in terms of circumstances now is very different. So I was very, this became an interesting challenge to like, what is gathering? What is the way in which we can gather and like loiter and like push against both these physical spaces and also be cultivated in digital spaces? And so this project was kind of like thinking through these networks of loitering within the networks itself, and then can also be experienced through the smartphone and Android, and these networks are very important in terms of what Ravi Sundaram calls the pirated network, where it's about low income South Asian communities having access to media, and that within the pixelation and glitched imagery, they see themselves, you know? So I still am interested in like holding on to that as like a main component as part of the project, which is why the experience can be, you can experience it through your phone. This piece, yeah.
Yeah, I actually just I came from another Maker Faire event, Culture Hub, uh, sorry, hyphen hubs, social VR experiment with Matthew Gant and Claudia Hart, which is another platform that I've been seeing kind of pop up a little bit more during this COVID time that allows people to enter this virtual world and perform or see performances as avatars and kind of just playing with this other new way um, of gathering here. Ryan, you're used to working in software and Umber, you as well. You're working in video a lot and some sculpturally. But I would say that like you're both artists that have adapted and whose work can be adapted to this like new state. I'm trying not to say new normal, but for lack of a better phrase, this new normal. Um, your works can be adapted to this new normal very very easily, but how has like why Dumb Desire now? Would you have made that pre-COVID? Was this new normal, did it come into play with like thinking behind wanting to make a work like this at all for you?
I would say that I might have put more into it pre-COVID, and now that we're post or in present COVID, I think that really that work, frankly, it was not a big project, and it arose out of a feeling of kind of being at a loss for like what even to reference, and it kind of to some extent uh, reflects kind of like my reality for the past several months, which has just been like this white cube, like my home office, and so but I am really interested again in it kind of clarifies for me like this, and Umber talks about like sense of movement and activating a kind of feeling of movement and global movements, but also just like individual movements, motions through like the thing about Gamespace is like you can just like kind of draw, like you can move your mouse like 2 inches and then the whole world can just like and that exaggeration is really powerful, and it's kind of like seeing photocopy.net, it's like is this kind of beautiful evocation of like the everything's orbiting around, or I don't know if it's you're orbiting around the globe, and it's just in that kind of demonstrating that kind of motion. It's like you're and then the way that it plays with scale, talking about a single roundabout. Same with when I was watching, I think Tommy, you were tracing the animal drawing, and so I was just like it wasn't for me, it wasn't the outline of the image or that was forming, it was about like following your cursor as it was moving across. And so like I don't know, I do think that maybe what I'm interested in terms of game space is this ability to kind of produce meaning through these literal gestures. I was, and this yeah, anyway, it kind of relates to, I was attending a talk about the gentrification of Flushing earlier this week, and it's very similar. It's well, I don't know, but just the sense that it's being gentrified by developers, well, by developers who are powered by global capital, but who are also self-identifying as like the newer generations of Chinese immigrants who feel a connection to this place. But there is this lingering question of like who arrived, and who is perpetually arriving, who is choosing to stay, who grew up there and who is now like avoiding this place, who continues to go because this is like Flushing is like a food destination, a cultural destination, and so like so I think that this idea of tourism resonates more broadly too with the sense of occupying a virtual space as well. And I think that some, in terms of gathering, some game spaces, some like Second Life type spaces, I think they kind of map a little bit too neatly one to one, like this idea of like, well, we have public gatherings where a bunch of people get together in a place, and then we have it on the screen too, like a bunch of avatars get together in a place. But I think we're both talking about maybe something a little bit more elusive than that, or a little bit more, not necessarily about what's represented on the screen, if that makes sense. I just went on for a really long time, I'm sorry.
No, it was great. Thank you so much, Ryan. And can I respond to that, Tommy?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. I was very interested. It's interesting that you thought about like movement, like within experiencing photocopy.net or just seeing documentation, because that's essentially what I just kept thinking when experiencing uh, dumb desires, right? And there
Dumb
were,
desire, yeah.
yeah, and there were moments in I wasn't sure what element was matching what. It felt like the smaller screen, the way it was moving was attempting. I thought at first it was attempting to match the white cube, but over time, the longer that you're in the space, you realize there's a whole nother logic, right? There's a kind of like separation. And so I think what's interesting is both the use of text as a disruption, and then also kind of different senses of time. The time of the gallery and the movement of the gallery is very different to the smaller screen, which is also different to, I guess, the pacing of the text, of it being perpetual. And I think that idea of movement in game space is really interesting, because it's not about a collapse, as you were mentioning with your example of Second Life, but it's more about kind of refining these like parallel experiences that just so happen to be experienced through a screen. So I thought that was really great. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was responding to this kind of this conference or this what was it, this kind of thinking about gentrification, Flushing the other day, and also relating that to the gentrification of digital spaces, and thinking about the internet as a site for colonialism as well, and then how we've been moving away from physical events and more towards virtual environments, hosting our kind of conferences and fairs online, and thinking about ways in which indigenous people are kind of like gentrified outside of like these kind of virtual spaces as well. So it became kind of customary and very common for us to kind of do a land acknowledgement at our physical events prior to COVID. In New York, at least, we would recognize the Lenape people, and that our conference was happening on stolen land. Then we moved towards virtual environments. This became a practice that we didn't feel the need to kind of acknowledge anymore, because we might all be coming from different places, and it's just something that we would hear. I didn't hear as much of, and so there's a piece by Lajane McMillian that premiered on Friday, that we co-sponsored with Abrams Art Center, which was a movement and kind of another kind of 3D environment that was created by Marguerite Hemmings and Lajane McMillian, that I guess I can't speak too much about the content of the piece or what it was about, but it began with a virtual land acknowledgement that was written by Salome Asega and Amber Muskogee, who is an indigenous artist, and they were recognizing and kind of like called into or just acknowledge the fact that the internet itself is a site where colonialism can occur, I think is also something that Ryan, you engage with your work as well, and just how whiteness asserts itself as the kind of dominant um, face in digital spaces and technology. Um, so I thought that that was interesting, and something that you all are both, all of us are kind of collectively thinking about it in an interesting way. Colonialism, digital spaces, the site for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe there's this other assumption that I have become aware of the more of these virtual conferences and talks I attend or participate in, which is there might be this strong assumption that something has happened or some connection has been made just because we all clicked the same link and logged onto the meeting at the same time or something. And that kind of literalness of thinking that, oh, well, this is a talk. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's like, we're all in different places. We're coming from different places. Even if we were gathering the same place, we would be coming from different places. And, but then there's this way that the structure, like the UI, like it's set up to kind of like really strongly suggests that we're like a couple of squares that are just like mashed into like one square, and we're all sitting next to each other, right? But I mean, this is obvious to an extent, but I think that literalness of like the way we interpret this kind of system as being like, oh, this has been a conference, that's a projection that I think is a cultural projection. I think that comes from, and I think kind of taking that at face value, like Umber was talking about how like this piece, this dumb desires, this kind of like, yeah, this is a very instinctual kind of thing. Is like, is this supposed to line up, or is it not? Or is it choosing not to line up, or is it trying to? So like this is like a dance, a constant dance, with and against this kind of cultural expectation. I think. I don't know if I'm being too abstract, but
Absolutely. I think you're making sense to me.
And I think it totally makes sense, like your observation, because it's like essentially you're focusing on this kind of like interface design, right? So it's like, so the dumb desires is like the clashing of these, not the clashing, but the playing of these two interfaces. And even in your description of like these Zoom conferences, it's like looking at these boxes that are next to each other. It's like, how are we collapsing this experience also? Yeah.
I think of Brady Bunch a lot. So we're which is also
Yeah.
another white, very, very white space. The whitest space is the Brady Bunch. And so we're all kind of like playing whiteness just by being stacked next to each other.
Yeah, and those Brady Bunch, sorry to follow this, but like I just,
Let's do this.
those
Let's
openings,
do it.
I'm just saying, it's like the opening, it's like they're already reflecting self-awareness of this condition, right? Because they're all like looking at each other from within their boxes. So it's kind of like, have we really like advanced in our kind of like consciousness, like since the Brady, like it was already kind of like we could do that with TV, with whatever those like these, what I mean, frames.
Well, we're doomed to do continuously. We're doomed to like more like a Brady Bunch reunions and.
But it's accelerated, so it's like live. It's not just like pre-recorded, which is also kind of another element of it, right? It's not the performed, it's like it's live, it's happening right now.
Which is taking us into Black Mirror territory. It's great.
But it's like we're all one big nuclear family now. That's just,
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Well, I feel like we could go on this tangent. Is there anything? I hate to cut it short, but I don't have anything else to talk about. What else is going on? Ryan, you were chopping peppers last night. What did you make for dinner?
I made well, frankly, it was a kind of throwaway dinner of peppers and some bacon with some spaghetti mixed in. I normally make I normally like really good Chinese food, but last night was a cheat night. So yeah.
Delicious.
I was thinking about actually food in the context of music and sound art, which was something that came up in a conversation yesterday. Food is kind of like an underutilized medium in the arts, I feel. And there was another piece that was kind of like um, referenced yesterday as well by Asher Toledo, who runs Hyphen Hub, that is called Arrow Banquets, and is a project by Matthias. I forget, and I can't pronounce his last name. But is a Hyphen Hub artist, and it's a VR experience that kind of allows people to like taste things. But the things that they taste or bring into their mouth or pick up are kind of virtual objects that are like motion tracked, and they see these like other kind of like orbs or floating kind of shapes and colors in their VR headsets. And what they're actually kind of like going to put into their mouth is some kind of like, you know, salmon crudo, like elegant thing. And then this kind of like disassociation between like what you're actually tasting and what you think you're tasting or seeing creates this kind of like, orgasmic kind of like food experience. So I wonder what the future holds for food in the arts. Thoughts?
Just add more sensorial experiences through these digital spaces. um,
Virtual, I mean, I guess I'm just like finding like the limitations of virtual environments or what those are.
But so actually, that brings to mind a question I had, which is that photocopy.net is not, that's like one piece of a broader, not entirely virtual project, right? Or is it the main project?
It's part of a larger project. So there's an animation, a virtual reality installation, and they're all different components. So like the animation is like a promo video for Trans Pakistan. And then I have a lecture performance where I'm a travel agent on behalf of of Trans Pakistan. And then for the VR installation, I recreated a online, like a virtual roundabout, that has my voiceover that you can like kind of walk around. Um, and so I hope to expand the series with augmented reality and have like create an app and a interface for a walking tour experience to be had in Pakistan in the housing community. But that's yet to happen, and let's see what the future holds in
Well, you're
terms of,
working, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
And Umber's working with us on that AR project, and you're making progress on it. So
Yeah.
it's been exploratory, but you've actually been doing stuff for that. What are the postcards and like the tracings? So there's like an interaction that I like a lot in that piece, which is like the ability to draw with your cursor and leave your mark in this space. What is that about?
So I mentioned the handmade sculptures that are kind of in the housing community around the periphery, and I was very interested in the idea of the handmade. So a lot of the elements in the installation are scanned drawings, and so I've been interested in thinking about the handmade, the residue, kind of being translated into these digital spaces, um, and then also having the user having the ability to add to the copy, the extension of the copy. Um, and so the idea of the user having agency, I see, I wonder what Ryan thinks, but having the ability to interact in this limited capacity um, in this space is part of the experience that I've wanted the user to have, to not just be a pedestrian, right? So the walking tour app essentially was to have it is activated when the user walks. So through the movement of the user, the experience can be had, right? So that logic is kind of also translated in the experience of photocopy.net.
Excellent. Yeah. So that the copy and yeah, the copy. All right, y'all. So I think maybe I might just say thank you for joining us today, and for kind of running us through some of the things you're thinking about with those pieces. Y'all can experience these on our Maker Faire kind of exhibitor portal. I was able to find it through searching the Maker Faire site for Pioneer Works, and logging on through there. But I thank you. You can see more of Umber's work at umbermajeed.com, and Ryan Kuo at ryankuo.net. Correct? No, Ryan Kuo. rkuo.net. So thanks y'all. I guess I'll be connecting with everybody. Oh yeah, does anybody have any questions? No, there's one person here. Tiffany, do you have any questions?
My coworker.
Really?
Yeah.
We've had a few
Thanks,
people
Tiffany.
coming in, but but these will be I don't know, uploaded or maybe not. Maybe we'll never see this again, which is okay too. But it was great catching up with both of you. Starving for social interactions.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Tommy. This was great.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you, Maker Faire and Valentino. Have a great day, everybody.